Hey everybody, this is that video that I've been trying to get up forever that I was talking about, the Horton mine mystery out in California. There was a hiker, an explorer. He doesn't have a paranormal channel at all. In fact, I'll put the links to both of these original videos down below in the description box. Then his channel is still up, so you can see his other content. He's just a hiker and an explorer, and he goes into these abandoned mines and caves and takes footage, and he has no paranormal slant to his work at all. He's just an explorer. But back in 2013, he went into California's Horton mine. And this mine connects into a series of other mines. It was used to transport ore. So it mainly connects, the section he went into connects into Victorine mine as well. But the tunnel system goes out all through the border states, really, through California, into Nevada, into Arizona. So this ties in to the video that we just did about the double entendre that they always use about battleground states. So anyway, out in California, he went into this Horton mine in 2013. But when he got in there, several strange things happened that he caught on tape. And this is where it went viral, and it took the paranormal slant. People took the tape and they showed the chains and screaming and things like that. So you can see, like, here's a Pinterest clip from the chains. Nobody's in there and it's moving chains. So since there was such a profound interest in this particular mine, he decided to go back and do a second video. Here's a picture of one of the entrances. This is the entrance that he went in there in California. So when he went back this time, he went even deeper, all the way to where the other entrances were blocked off. You can see the rocks stacked, they're sort of blocked off, but there's water coming in from somewhere. And so he goes back almost as far as you can in this cave during the second video. And then suddenly, this is when the second quote unquote paranormal encounter happens with the voices and all of that. So the whole mine exploration videos are probably 20-30 minutes worth. I'm just going to pop in a few like 60-second clips right here to start this off. We'll get more into it in a little bit.
Okay, here's a lower adit at the Victorine mine. I believe this was an older mine that once they dug the upper tunnels, this got incorporated into the same claim or whatever. I forget what this was called, this particular mine entrance here, but this one's got a little bit of water in it coming out of it. Okay, we can go in here and just take a quick look. I don't think I'm going to explore this particular mine. There's a little bit too much water in here, and I do see other footprints here in the mud, but I just don't think it's wise to go in here when there's water. Try to avoid this if I can. Creepiest mine tunnels I've ever been in, just because of how dilapidated it is and all these chains hanging down from the overhead, and there's a shot looking down the tunnel even further. But here's a shot looking back towards the entrance. I'm a little bit further in, and looking down the tunnel here. I don't know why that one chain is swinging back there. Don't know if you can see that in the video or not. Yeah, this mine definitely has a very spooky vibe to it. So I'm going to head back out and check out the other stuff that's here. This is just too wet and too muddy. And obviously something is making the chains swing. So time to get the hell out of here. And the Horton mine is over here to the right. And that's where I'm headed. And just a real quick shot here, looking around at the canyon. Pretty spectacular scenery up here. Let's go check this out, see if it's any drier than it was a year ago when I was last here. Okay, we're getting deeper. Here is some kind of backfilled area on the other side of the tunnel. More ventilation tubing. And there's a lot of water up here coming in from somewhere. Well, I believe I've reached the end of the tunnel. I thought it was going to be a lot longer than this. Okay, here's a final parting shot of the end of the Horton tunnel. And there's the ore pass. with all the cascading water. And what the fuck is that? I don't know what that was, but there was a sudden blast of cold air, and I'm getting out of here.
So for whatever reason, when people saw that footage, their mind immediately jumped to like ghosts and the paranormal, and every single report on it that I saw has had that slant. Now, granted, we know how the censorship is, and maybe the internet is being scrubbed of people who have other takes on it. I don't know. But you can see here, this is the general consensus of everything I've been able to find, on the Horton mine. And you can see this is no small thing. These that went viral like 7 years ago, look at this, 3.3 million views, 3.7 million views. And there weren't, 7 years ago, there weren't even nearly as many users on these social media platforms as there are now. But again, creepy, ghost-filled mine, haunted, abandoned mine. On and on, every single one has the same exact slant. This one's interesting, that then 2 years ago, this guy went to do a follow-up and found, he said, I'm very disappointed to say that the famous Horton mine has been fenced off. So keep that in mind. That's extremely interesting when we get to what I think we're hearing on those tapes. It is clear that the mainstream bogarted the clip after this guy was relatively unheard of back then, but after this went viral, then the Science Channel stepped in and grabbed the footage and put it on one of their specials, Strange Evidence, Season 4, Episode 4. So, of course, that helped concrete people's mindsets to where it had been presented to them in this one fashion the entire time. And the mainstream drove that home, saying, this is what you're looking at. Or if you're going to question the things you see around you in reality, then make sure you're questioning them this way. Ooh, haunting, ghosts, that sort of thing. Likewise, in the Vietnam War, I'm sure most of you remember hearing all about the tunnel rats. These, ooh, what a job. These brave soldiers, that's what they did. They had to crawl down because the entryways into this underground cavern system where the communist military was stationed underneath their feet, the entryways, a lot of them were like barely big enough to squeeze through, like 2 feet wide. But once you got down in there, so like here, the access holes were breathtakingly small, some measuring 2 feet wide by 3 feet deep. They led to tunnels connected by hidden trap doors that zigzagged up, sideways, and down. These tunnels led to a labyrinth of caverns and caves that spread across up to 4 levels for 200 miles, stretching all the way to the Cambodian border. Again, so common to see the communists or the Nazis, crossing the border and building camps, stationing military underground. Let's look at a couple pictures from the Vietnam War to show you, exactly what we're talking about here. So here's an Australian soldier finding one of the trap doors that was, you can see how small that is to squeeze through there just to get into the entrance and then, go down. They weren't all this small, but they had a lot of trap doors. And we'll talk more about this with the missing 411 cases here when we get into this, because it's ludicrous for us to believe that nobody's ever thought of anything like this, that there couldn't be things like this in the national forest or in these cavern systems or anything like that, because throughout world history, we've seen that that's what they always do. So, yeah, this plays into the missing 411 cases, especially when we translate. I'll show you the translation of what those voices, those haunting voices and whispers in the cave were actually saying here in a minute. Here's an American soldier who found another entrance into it. This is Sergeant Ronald Payne of Atlanta, Georgia, here in Vietnam. Now here's a picture once you squeeze through the entryway into the next size cave. So this would be the type of thing that they would have to go through and explore. And then these are the ones that led into the main cavern system that stretched for 200 miles, that was filled with communist troops right under their feet. So they could pop up at any time. They couldn't just have guys on guard, snipers watching the jungles. They couldn't just be watching the air with radar, because these guys would come out of nowhere, popping up in the woods and then disappear into nowhere. And when they tried to go follow them into these caves, they used biological warfare. They had bats and rats infected with the bubonic plague that they would put in boxes and set with tripwires. Here's one. They had boxes of scorpions with a tripwire that would open the box when the guys came through. All of that. So again, any of this sounding familiar? And I know, we've all heard the propaganda about why they had to burn down certain portions of the jungle that had these bubonic plague infected rats and stuff that had been loosed. I mean, we don't hear any of that, actually. What we hear is what the mainstream media, pretty much what they're teaching us now, that we should hate America, the communists in Vietnam were all the nicest people, and our American soldiers were all just terrible, horrible people. Oh, wait, who were the young soldiers who came back during the Vietnam War telling all those stories? Oh, yeah, John Kerry. Yeah, that was John Kerry. There's no shortage of pictures of him back then, fist up, going around on the circuit talking about how terrible America is and how wonderful the communists were. The Viet Cong were just so abused by Americans. But there was a reason. There were multiple layers of reasons that didn't come out in the mainstream propaganda media about why they had to burn certain areas of the jungle and about the biological warfare and all of that. I mean, it's similar to what the Bible says at the end of the age, that the earth will have to be cleansed by fire, that they've released so much stuff that we've just learned to live with. We're like, oh yeah, there's like billions around, like we think it's part of nature, and it's not. And there will be a cleansing time that everything will be restored. So I'm not saying that the Great Tribulation is going to be pretty, but it is all in God's mercy in the end. And yes, the things that happened in Vietnam, even though we weren't told every single reason why everything was done, it certainly is not the narrative that these people that we still see visiting Antarctica and spinning this anti-American narrative still today. It's not what they told us. It's certainly no coincidence that they're involved in every single one of these battlegrounds, and that, in my opinion, the truth is not what they have told us. And likewise, even though it's been on the Science Channel, this Horton mine mystery, talking about, ooh, what is that? What are those voices and all of that? Even though they have, made this very concrete in the minds of the masses that if it's anything, it must be something paranormal and ghostly. I disagree. I think it's something much more obvious than that. Well, obvious to a mind that isn't brainwashed, really. Because these underground activities didn't just stop in World War II or in the Vietnam War, like somebody just flipped a switch and are like, oh, humans would never think of that ever again. No, of course not. They're going on even today. And it's not just the Horton mine. This type of thing is recorded in abandoned mines and cavern systems all around the world. And people always jump to the conclusion that it's ghosts. So yeah, here's one with whispers where you can hear, and everybody knows caves, caverns echo. So what they're hearing are whispers, and somebody is saying, he can hear us, turn the lights out. Again, that to me sounds way more like what we've seen throughout all of history, and that there's some sort of underground facility off of one of these chutes, and it has electricity if they're saying turn the lights out because they don't want the explorer to detect them. Well, I mean, of course, it doesn't have to mean electricity, but you get the point that it could be humans. It seems like it could be flashlights or them have some sort of candlelight, or I don't know. But the point is, the first thing that would occur to me would be humans. And why, if there are humans trafficking through these tunnels, would they be hiding from you? If they were just other explorers or something, why would they be like, oh no, he hears us, turn the lights out? I mean, that more sounds like somebody who's smuggling something to me. Likewise, there were several things in the Horton mine footage that jumped out at me that, of course, my first thought was, it's humans. Like he says when he first enters, oh, look, there's muddy footprints. There's footprints. He's like, he wasn't going to go in, but he's like, well, humans have been walking through here because there's muddy footprints. So he goes in a little bit. Then he gets in there, and you can see on all of these chains, there are these brand new white ropes tied on the chains. See them tied on the chains? And they're brand new and white. I mean, those aren't from the old mines. In fact, when he goes back a year later, most of them are removed, but some of them you'll see in the footage as he goes back are really dirty by then, even a year later. But these, in his initial entrance, were brand new and white. And it's creepy because they're not just up at the tops up here. You look at these down here at the bottom. Some of these are tied like, you know, a foot or two off the ground. So no, my mind wouldn't jump to ghosts as leaving footprints in the mud and bringing in, you know, new bundles of twine to secure something to these overhead chains. And likewise, you heard, if you watch the footage, he stood at the mouth of the cave talking about, I'm not going to go in there. I don't know, it's too wet. It doesn't look safe. You know, hum-hawing around for a while before he went in. But then he finally goes in, he gets back there and sees one of the chains still swinging. Now, why would you think ghost? I would think, what was tied to that chain? You know, who just got the heck out of there? And where did they go? And like I said, that goes along with so many of these other ghost show footages that people are catching accidentally all over the world in these cavern systems. They're not just random words or, you know, like, oh, it sounds like the old miners. Oh, and I can hear a mule pulling a cart. No, that's not what they hear. These people are saying sentences like, hey, we're about to get caught. Turn the lights out. And they're saying be very quiet and all of that type of stuff. Here, I'll play the clip. For me, the enhanced version isn't as clear as just listening to it straight out, but I'll play the enhanced version and it might help. Now, this is in Horton Mine. This is one of those examples of other mines. This is Waldeck Mine.
And then you can see how big these timbers are. That's about almost a foot in diameter, the big cross timber. So they had to put big ones in here to hold up all of this rock. And you can see right here where some of these boards are bending. Do you hear that? Is that wind? I don't know if you can hear that on the camera. Do you hear that? It stopped. I don't know what that is. That doesn't sound like wind, but that's crazy. Don't know if that's a bird or I don't know what that is. It almost sounds like snakes, but
Okay, so I hope you could hear that. I know it's low. I mean, they were whispering, and that's what makes it so creepy. It sounds like you're hearing whispers echo through the caves, but that's because you are. Somebody in there was in there doing something that they didn't want to get caught doing, and they were hiding and whispering, you know, oh, can he hear us? Okay, you know. But I hope you could hear it. Maybe I should have chosen another. I mean, there's a limitless amount of these. It's just like in the missing 411 with hikers going missing. There are so many cases. You know, he's written how many books they're all like 3 inches thick. It's the same way with these caves. If you really want to look into this subject, there's just a limitless amount of this found in these abandoned tunnel systems, caverns, mines, things like that all join together with other tunnel systems. So I could have made the whole video just a montage of one after the other, after the other, after the other of these ghost clips and, you know, put them in this context and see if it doesn't make sense in a different light. Okay, so back to the Horton mine. Now let's listen to what they were saying. It's a little harder to make out because that last clip, they were speaking English. But in the Horton mine clip, there's 2 languages. The first person, when the sirens go off, as if somebody escaped, the first person is speaking in a foreign language. And then the guy who answers back, he's cursing in English, and he's like, "Who are you?" And then they answer back. Well, the best translation that I've seen so far, that it sounds like to me, does sound like the foreign language of the one is French, and which would go along with the European style siren. But I'm not saying that these are French people, because here in just a little bit, when we get into Ghislaine Maxwell, she speaks like 4 languages. A lot of these international traffickers do. So let's listen to that clip again.
What the fuck is that?
So you'll have to be the judge. It's not perfect, but this is interesting. So the woman's voice says out over the intercom, and I'm not saying this is Ghislaine Maxwell, I'm just saying that these people speak multiple languages, but over the intercom, the woman's voice says, "Why pass?" in French. She says, "Why did you pass the line? Why pass? Are you prepared to die?" And then the American guy, or the English speaking guy, curses and then says, "Who are you?" And then she says, "You went too far forward, near us, now go." And the siren is going off. Now, to me, again, as far as clues go, the siren is telling, because different nations, different cultures do have their own style of sirens, and our American sirens are different from European sirens.
This is a European siren.
Like, here's a typical French police siren. But here's a typical US police siren. So that's interesting. You would think if this was something American built, that you would have an American styled siren. But this one reminds me of the type of sirens that they use in prisons and mental hospitals and things like that over in Europe. Let me see if I can find a clip of that. Yeah, here's Broadmoor's escape siren.
What the fuck is that?
Now, obviously, the reason why I think this is so important, and this is an important video to do, is because writing all of this stuff off as ghosts, even though I absolutely believe in the spiritual realms, the other dimensions, you guys know that, but writing all of this stuff off as, oh, it's ghosts, whispers, and it's paranormal, and it's all of this. I mean, think about what we're doing here. When you have people underground in America, witnesses are literally hearing people speaking in foreign languages. They're hearing the sirens and the alarm systems they have in these underground prisons. They're actually witnessing this. They're hearing gunshots underground. They're hearing all of this. And we're writing it off as mysteries. These are mystery booms being heard everywhere. Oh, these mysterious whispers and ghosts. And it's like, what? Our military needs to be checking this stuff out. This is dire. If we have foreign troops on our soil underground, then our military needs to be in these cavern systems. We need our tunnel rats here, not in Vietnam. We need our soldiers going through these tunnel systems and finding out who these people are. Why are so many people, Americans, being abducted in these forest areas, in these mountains, and around these caverns, these national parks, all of this missing 411 stuff? And then we see this. In fact, here's another interesting case. I do believe this was in the Missing 411 books, but I'm going to grab a clip here from the Missing Enigma channel. because he did a really nice presentation of this with drawings and everything. So I'll put his link down below, and then he has links, different sources, the Mount Shasta News and stuff. But this is about a 3.5-year-old boy that was missing, that came up missing. And thank God he was one of the little ones who were recovered. So he was recovered. But after they found him, he told his family, and he reported that a woman had taken him out into a cave inside of Mount Shasta. And he saw in there lots of stuff that was people's stuff was in there, just past the entrance. Like before you get in deep, there was like a staging area where I guess they stripped people down of their belongings, because there were backpacks there, there were guns in there were people's purses in there, he said, and they were like old piles covered in cobwebs and stuff. So that's interesting, because, you know, David Paulides, he also did Missing 411 books on missing hunters, you know, so that's interesting that then there's their hunting weapons and stuff are in there, and backpacks from hikers, that this little 3.5-year-old child, who obviously has not read Dave's giant series of books, that he reports seeing this area where all of that stuff was at.
Appeared out of nowhere, grabbed him, and took him to a creepy place. He further described that he was taken to a cave, and there were old guns, purses, and bags, covered in cobwebs and spiders and dirt. It seemed as if they had been there for a long time.
This is serious, and I cannot imagine that our intelligence agencies and our, you know, top generals and all of that haven't thought of that. Seeing that during World War II and the Vietnam War and all this, that we fought the communists and the Nazis underground before. I mean, this isn't conspiracy theory. We know that Birkenstall, the underground factory, a work camp, a concentration camp underground where they had prisoners working, building these ammunitions, these bombs and everything underground. This is common knowledge. So you can't tell me that our greatest military strategic minds, you know, in all of our intelligence agencies and the Pentagon and everything, haven't considered that if we're hearing underground voices that are speaking foreign languages in our cavern systems, in these same exact places that, as David Paulides says, that we have these clusters of missing people all around these mountain ranges, all around these places, people are just going missing. When we know throughout history that they had prison camps, work camps underground, the enemy did. So it's mind-boggling. But in my humble opinion, I think, of course, they know. And I don't think they're all bad guys. When the bad guys are in charge, it's completely covered up. They go around covering up. It's what the men in black do. The black hats, it's what they do. They go around covering it all up, covering their tracks. But there are people fighting. And I know there are a lot of cynical people who do not want to believe there are any good guys, because there is rampant corruption. But let's look back to the past with J. Edgar Hoover. He denied, because they had the dirt on him. And I'll play clips of that later. I've played them before, but some of you may not have seen it. So I'll put a couple clips from a documentary here in a little bit when I close this out. But J. Edgar Hoover denied, he refused to investigate the mafia. He said the mafia did not exist under the JFK administration, right? And of course, JFK and Bobby Kennedy were trying to fight the mafia and expose the mafia. So despite the fact that J. Edgar Hoover wouldn't even admit that a crime syndicate existed, especially one that was nationwide or worldwide, in the end, he wasn't able to stop the exposure. The FBI, Hoover's FBI, wouldn't do anything to prosecute any of these mafia guys. But local law enforcement opened their own investigation and started working with other agencies behind the FBI's back. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was this giant raid in upstate New York. There was a giant raid, and the heads of all 5 mafia families were there meeting.
Novell, who had worked for the White House in the early 1960s, became involved in a complicated legal action which the White House wanted him to pursue, but which Hoover wanted dropped.
So I went to the White House, and the White House sent me to Mr. Angleton, Director of Counterintelligence, CIA. We met in a restaurant, and I told him my problem, and he says, I know what your problem is. He said, you need to tell Mr. Hoover that you've met with me, and that you're not going to dismiss the lawsuit, and that you've seen this. At which point he opened up his briefcase and pulled out a couple of photographs of Mr. Hoover in flagrante delicto, I guess is one way to describe it.
Then in 1957, mafia chieftains from all over the United States gathered in the small town of Appalachian, New York, to meet at the home of Joseph Barbara. When local police raided this gangland conference and arrested the delegates, it caused a sensation. It also removed Hoover's excuse for inaction.
The discovery of the meeting at Appalachian, New York was a big rise in public interest and government interest in what were these 100 people doing in this rural location in New York State.
In Chicago, FBI Special Agent William Romer achieved an extraordinary breakthrough.
In 1959, in Chicago, we had placed the microphone into the general headquarters of the Chicago mob on the Magnificent Mile. And Sam Giancana, who was the boss of the Chicago mob at that time, had just come back from a commission meeting in the East, and he laid out exactly who the members of the commission were all across the country. And we, at that time, determined that there was such a thing as what they themselves called the National Commission, which was the ruling body of organized crime. And it was a very, very important breakthrough for us.
So it does happen. But, you know, this is World War. It didn't go down without a hitch. You know, both of these two men were assassinated. Both JFK and Bobby, his attorney general, were assassinated. So, you know, it's war. This is the way it goes. But the mafia was exposed, and we're still battling corruption in our, you know, intelligence agencies and FBI and everything today. And they're refusing the most outright blatant investigations. They're refusing to do anything. But that doesn't mean nothing's happening. There are white hats behind the scenes in different agencies, in local agencies. And you know how I know that? Because the body of Christ is still here. And God is still on the throne. So you either believe that God is the Most High God, or you don't believe He's God at all. And as for me and my family, we believe that He's the Most High God. And we believe He's still on the throne. And His people are still here. And you better believe that no matter how smart the Illuminati, the cabal, the, you know, International Crime Syndicate, whatever you want to call them, the evil empire, Mystery Babylon, no matter how smart they are, they're not smarter than God. That's their pride. They think they are, but they are not. If they can think to infiltrate every agency, you can bet your bottom dollar that God thought of it long before they did. And I've been talking about this for years. These videos here are from back in 2017, the mystery booms being recorded across the country and across the world. And, you know, I put the news reports and everything in there that clearly there's a war going on under our feet. We can hear it. We can feel the ground shake. This is happening.
You would hear it in the house. Sometimes it shakes the house.
Mysterious explosions rocking an East Independence neighborhood, and no one seems to know what's causing it.
41 Action News reporter Brian Abel has the story you will not see anywhere else. It's just like, I'm jumping. Well, there's small ones and there's big ones.
Well, it feels like my whole house is just shaking. It feels like a bomb is actually going off in my backyard.
Okay, now close your eyes and imagine that these sounds I'm getting ready to play are muffled by being underground, but they sound like what the people say they're hearing. Explosions and then some gunshots. You see where I'm going with this? Just imagine that that's muffled and underground.
But some experts are just baffled about what it could be.
I'm calling because we're hearing continuous, sounds like explosions. We're hearing loud explosions. My house is shaking. The horses are freaking out. Does anybody know what's going on?
It sounded like thunder, but like I said, you could feel the ground shake, and it was nothing like an earthquake. You know, we felt earthquakes before, and it's nothing like that.
You definitely knew it wasn't a firework going off, because I've never heard anything like it. Like, very disturbing.
And David and Ann, interestingly, there have been reports of a similar boom from across the United States as far as Arizona.
We obviously dispatch cars. I believe EFD dispatched some fire people. I'm sure EPD dispatched people to the area. At the end of the day, we've not been able to find anything.
Crews scoured the area, but didn't find anything. It wasn't an earthquake. The USGS doesn't have reports of any activity in our area. Some people have suggested a nearby mine was firing off explosion. But when we called Vigo, which is opening a mine near Boonville, they said their permit does not allow them to blast from dusk till dawn. And the Air Force says it wasn't performing any military drills either. Authorities say, at least for now, it will remain a mystery.
Okay, but to wrap up this Horton mine mystery and finish up with what I was talking about, Ghislaine Maxwell. So it's also common knowledge that the militaries of the world, you know, this is like mainstream news. You can go on any of these official checkmark ones and see, it's common knowledge that throughout the last World War and even up till now, the militaries of the world, they have these underground submarine bases. It's just what they do. They're built into the sides of mountains and off the edges of the ocean and that type of thing. They're marinas for submarines. And you can go check out clips of that everywhere. There's some really just amazing. It's amazing to look at the technology. But as pertaining to the Horton mine mystery, or at least the, you know, the idea of that sort of thing, you're talking about a coastal state, California, right? And you'll notice that in his video, he said it was as if something opened, a chamber opened. He said that he felt a gust of air coming from what should have been a closed end of the mine. But before he heard all of this, the sirens going off and the lady over the intercom system or whatever, he felt this gust of wind as if something had opened. And also, if you watch the full version of his videos, his content on his channel, he talks about the water in there not being stagnant, that there was a source of water that seemed to be draining in when these things opened. So, you know, of course, there's natural water in the earth, natural waterways and springs. Of course, it could be something like that. But I wanted to open up the possibility, talking along this line, that these things are real. There are caverns built into the land masses along the ocean where they make marinas out of them, submarine marinas. And believe it or not, this piece of the puzzle locks in to this piece of the puzzle that I was talking about in the last video, these battleground states. And what does this thing going on politically have to do with what I'm talking about right here? And in that video, I had referenced an old video from 2018, this whistleblower, What's in Antarctica, and this guy's prophetic visions from 2005, talking about this ambush that God showed him all those years ago. And this is exactly what he saw, that there were these marinas, these underground caverns and tunnel system, and that they had a port, a marina in there that had different sized submarines, and they were going in and out of these abandoned mines and abandoned cavern systems. They had been repurposed. Enter the Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein connection, because she not only had her airplane license, she wasn't just an airplane pilot, she was also a submarine pilot. And that's probably not the right word, pilot for submarine, what, a captain? I don't know. She was licensed for both. She can fly planes and she can sail or drive submarines. And she was the face of this whole foundation, you know, the Terramar project, where she talks about diving since she was 9 years old and all of this. But anyway, yeah, she has tons of talks out there publicly about these small submarines, these small submersible crafts that are, able to go in and out of everywhere. So we had been talking about the different pathways in that last video that they found German U-boats could get through from the ocean into the Great Lakes, even, right up here above me, above Chicago, this Michigan area, right? The double entendre battleground states. Most people would consider those lakes. They're landlocked, but they aren't. But we're not even talking about, military-sized submarines anymore. There are these luxury submarines now that, like Elaine was talking about, small private submersible yachts, they call them. And we've probably all seen this diagram of Epstein Island. I can't obviously vet any of this. There was a raid there. I'm not privy to any of that information. The only part that I would say for sure, I think, would make sense, since it is an island, and Epstein's private pilot is also licensed for submarines and has this whole Terramar project. I think it's safe to say that, yeah, there is a submarine bay over here, which leads us back to why it's so important about this current regime. But we'll close with that little clip here in just a second. Right now, I'll show you this clip of Ghislaine Maxwell in her own words, verifying what I just said about the submarines and the languages and all of that.
Is founder and president of the Terramar Project, a nonprofit whose mission is to create a global ocean community to protect and promote sustainable development of the ocean. Ghislaine is easily one of the smartest, most fascinating people I've ever met. This is proven by the fact that she holds a bachelor's and master's degree from Oxford University, is a private helicopter pilot, a trained EMT, a qualified ROV, which I had to look up what that was, and a deep worker submarine pilot, in addition to being fluent in 4 languages. This is what I had written down before I realized that she spoke at the UN 9 times since the last time I saw her. So with that, I'd like to welcome Ghislaine Maxwell.
Good afternoon. I noticed that my speech today was leveraging technology to create a global ocean community. I'm going to change that on you, and I'm going to leverage technology to create a new country. I just want to go back briefly to talk to you about why I got involved in the ocean, and because I think it's important to have history. So I started diving when I was 9, having become passionate about the ocean, watching Jacques Cousteau on TV. And it led to a lifelong exploration around the ocean that ultimately ended with me becoming a deep worker submersible pilot.
Which makes it especially curious that these islands, this Caribbean island, which was an ex-military base created to guard the submarine base there in the U.S. Virgin Islands, that Joe Biden's brother, James Biden, do you guys remember? This is Politico. This is mainstream. It's Politico article. That scandal back in 2010, right after Obama got in office, that they were giving kickbacks. I'll put the link to this Politico article so you can go back and refresh your mind on the whole story if you're interested. But right now, I just want to talk about the submarines and these underground military bases. So yeah, Joe Biden's brother goes to this military base on Water Island and buys this plot of land. You can see it's not on the coast, and he never developed it. He didn't build a house there. He didn't do anything. All he did was an easement, and then he sold it off as if there were 3 somethings there to sell, and there's nothing to see there. So I don't know. Although Joe Biden and his family used to go there like every year to vacation. So anyway, they own this property that there's nothing on the surface, but this parcel right here that he sold to this guy named Green, he was a lobbyist. That's why this is a Politico article, because although there's nothing here, he sold this little piece on the edge of this nothing property to somebody else for almost the whole amount that he bought the property for. So he basically got his property here paid for. And the reason why it was a political story at the time was because the Biden-Obama administration had given a FEMA contract for $5.8 million to this lobbyist's company, Lafayette Group. And then this same guy, Green, the same lobbyist, 3 days later, kicked back to Biden's brother. Of course, they say it's not a kickback, but what he did was that Biden's brother had paid $150,000 for this property. So for this little sliver on the edge, Green gave Biden back $133,000 after he got the contract. But we know how all that kickback stuff goes and the Hunter Biden laptop and all this stuff. But I'm not trying to prove or disprove any of that right here. I just want to talk about these underground military infrastructure, these abandoned mines and abandoned tunnels and stuff. So yeah, the Bidens buy this property right here on Water Island. And you can go over and check out Water Island. Here's the fort. You can go down here, 2.2. It was built as part of the United States defense strategies during World War II on Water Island. anti-motor, torpedo boat, batteries, blah, 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 barracks, watchtowers, ammunitions, bunkers, infrastructures with docks. Some of the tunnels and underground rooms which were created during World War II building efforts are still visible, and some of those are even open for tours. So this Water Island military infrastructure was created as an underground fort, and its purpose was to protect the submarine base on St. Thomas. So I'm just saying, I'm just throwing some puzzle pieces out on the table. I'm not trying to cyberbully anybody or anything. But here we have Water Island, this abandoned military underground tunnel bunker infrastructure place where the Bidens buy property and don't build anything on the surface. So we have Water Island, and then this is St. Thomas. So this is where they were talking about the submarine base, the underground submarine base that this was supposed to protect, which just happens to be equidistant right between Little St. James and Water Island, which is Epstein Island. Now, it's also interesting that the Bidens also, live and work all around Seneca, New York. If you trace the ancestry records back, you can see that when they came over from Ireland and Scotland, you can see that his ancestors even settled in Seneca County. So, this goes back, way back to the early 1800s, which if you watch that last video, how I had mentioned what they call the Seneca guns, that there have been strange reports in this Seneca area, in Seneca Lake, actually. And, I'm going to leave their ancestry alone for a little bit because it's going to be in Titan Point 3, and it's just fascinating. When you trace the lineage of both Trump back to Scotland, his mother, and I'll go through all that with the royal families, and you can trace the Bidens also back to Ireland and Scotland. And believe it or not, it ties into this centuries-old battle of the royal families, like the Mary Queen of Scots. But anyway, for these purposes, I'm talking about Seneca, because Seneca Lake is the deepest and largest of the Finger Lakes, and it is connected to the Atlantic Ocean. It has 4 times the saltwater content of the other Finger Lakes, and it's connected directly to the Atlantic Ocean. Strange, huh? But not as strange as Hunter Biden having a giant back tattoo of the Finger Lakes, with Seneca Lake literally being right down his spine, his backbone. Unbelievable. Especially since Seneca Lake just happens to be a submarine base. Yeah, a submarine testing base. Now it's still a naval facility. It does sonar testing and nuclear submarine testing and, that type of thing. But it has long been associated with all sorts of mysterious, they're top secret. It's top secret. That's why when you see all these submarines coming in and out of that lake, these are all top secret tests and that type of thing. So a lot of that is chilled out in recent years, but over the last several decades, especially through the 1990s and the early 2000s, a lot of submarine activity in Seneca Lake. And obviously very, very important to Hunter Biden. In fact, in 2008, when Biden and Obama took over, it was also in 2008 that Hunter Biden launched his consulting company named Seneca Global Advisors. And apparently there's a lot of money in being a global advisor. I don't know what he's advising, but he's worth a crap load of money. I don't know what kind of advice this guy holds that he could give such expensive advice from Seneca. But apparently it's highly prized all throughout the Ukraine and communist China and all around the world. He must be the smartest guy in the world.
He is the smartest man I know. Come on.